You did a book a while back, which has become, I got this book a while ago. It was a book about portrait photography. And I remember going through it going, God, this is so easy to read and perfect. And since then, I might understand, I think I might, but didn't that book become a textbook at some colleges at their level? That's like the textbook.
Yeah, I was using it at Brooks, and then there's been multiple colleges across the United States that use it. It ended up in German. I think it was used in a university in Germany also, but and the Chinese bought it to use it in some of their teaching also.
So that, yeah, like I said, that's become the textbook out there. That was your first book, right? Didn't you do another one after that?
I did. Yeah, I did another one after that. I don't write well. I don't read well. I barely talk well. And the idea of me actually writing a textbook was like almost inconceivable for me. And I was joking around with a guy who was a colleague. He was saying, you should write a book. And I said, it's so difficult to write a book. And he goes, no, it's not. It's really easy. He had actually written 7, so we co-wrote it. Yeah, we're really proud of that book. Actually, most of the portrait stuff came from me, but he brought the images from a lot of really famous photographers that are current and since gone that we illustrated it with those images, which, I mean, I like my work, but I mean, a lot of artists to go out and do a book that's like, do what I do, I'm amazing, and this is really incredible. What we really wanted to do, what I wanted to do was really give a book about how and why we do things. Mm-hmm. And so we illustrated it with the works of other great artists. So that's one of my best favorite things about it. The second book is more about some of the advanced studio lighting techniques that I've been teaching. And so we kind of codified it and put it all together. That book's actually harder to find, believe it or not. So.
But it is out there. Are both books still available?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, if you go to Amazon, you can find them. And okay. So I actually have it's in its second edition. The first one's in its second edition. I have a couple copies of the first edition that I might sell for an exorbitant price. I'm joking.
Yeah, go find his
book.
book.
Just put Tim Meyer and portrait in there. You'll get to me.
Tim, you also hold an MFA, not just in photography, and I just found you have that also in art.
Well, so I have a master's in fine art, which is emphasis in photography, and then I went back to get the next level up on that, which would be the equivalent of doctorate. They don't have a doctorate. What they call the culminating degree for photography and fine arts is what we call an MFA.
I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the Getty with you. I don't know if you guys know this, but once or twice a year, if the planets align correctly and we can bend his arm, Tim takes a group of us up to the Getty Museum, and he's one of the only person that I know that can actually go into the bowels of the museum and demand to have works photography brought out.
Well, they actually have a program there at the Getty where they have what they call the study room. And it's not just me, but anybody, if you know the right people, can have 30 images from any of their collections brought out, and they actually put it out on the table and put it right in front of you. So it's really amazing. I take groups by there on a regular basis.
The last time that we went there, they had all of the works of art from the advertising photographers, the people, the commercial photographers. And, a lot of time that work wasn't considered art because it was commissioned work. So how is it art if it's something that, right, you're getting paid for? Can you speak about that a little bit? Because a lot of our heroes actually weren't even considered photographers.
Ironically or otherwise, literally, I'm teaching a student in the MFA class. He's actually wanting to do the work on fashion photography. And there's a catalog for that particular show. It's called Icons of Style. And you can actually Google that if you want. There's some of the books out there. That's the catalog to that particular show. It was put together by Paul Martineau, who's one of the curators there. Hands down, one of the best shows I've ever seen on fashion photography. They fashion photography was never considered a fine art because one, it was commissioned, it was paid for, and there was an art director involved. And so fine artists of the modern ilk don't really consider that art. And so that the fact that they put together a show showing living and also the history of fashion photography was really incredible. I learned a lot just even going there. And so if you're interested, get the book, the catalog. But I mean, fashion photography didn't start until basically I think it was '07, somewhere between 7 and 14. But it was because Steichen was commissioned to do fashion photography. Before that, there wasn't really any fashion magazines or the fashion industry at all. And they went straight on down the history. And it was really iconic in the way that they had some of the dresses that were actually in some of the photographs from prehistory. They also had contemporary photographers that are still alive that had their work on display. They had them there. And so they were really interesting because they were all taking selfies with their grandkids in front of their images because they had no idea that their work would ever make it into a museum. And then a lot of the models that were young models back in the 60s and the 70s were there. Joan Collins was there. Others were there. It's just, I was there at the opening. And so it was mind blowing. But yeah, if you're interested in fashion photography and the history of it, what was so interesting to me is that all the things that I learned in school and all the things that we considered hip and cool, like scratching negatives and or putting beautiful women in front of old dilapidated buildings, or even the idea of men being fashion objects, that was all really well documented. And so all the things we did in high school that we thought were cool were done originally by fashion photographers. And it's really amazing the impact they had on the industry.
It's interesting that you just said, taking models and, beautiful women and putting in front of dilapidated buildings. It's a natural segue for me to mention that you are going to be leading a model workshop in Joshua Tree, and we've get to go to Keys Ranch, which is a private area behind the gate in Joshua Tree. Most people don't even know it's there. And Tim will be leading the troops, so to say, at the the photo workshop with the center. You not only teach for us at the California Center, but you also I refer to you as furniture at West Coast School. I think you've been the instructor there ever since it started. And yeah.
I'm not that old, but I'm trying to figure out whether I hold the record or not. I have been doing it, I think, over 21 years in a row, maybe 25 years in a row.
Yeah.
And I think the only person I'm in competition with is Carlos Lozano. And he taught more programs, but not as many years, to my knowledge. But yeah, I'm kind of like furniture.
Yeah. And then you're also over, you're still which university are you teaching at?
I'm teaching a MFA program in called Mount St. Mary's in LA. They're the guys up on the hill with the fires that burn all the time. Although they have an amazing campus over by USC. And then actually one over on Hollywood Boulevard of all places too. That's where I work out of. And then I teach at a community college up in Lancaster area.
Okay. Do you have any live classes coming up?
Yeah, I think I got one coming up with you.
You do. So that one, it's a little twist on what you've done before. You do the studio lighting class, and then the the advanced lighting, and then you also do the natural and outdoor light. And what we've done is combine those classes together. So the first day you are indoors, and the second day you are outdoors. And also working with that window. So window light and outdoor lighting, and then the indoor. So looking for.
It might be better to say instead of being live, because I mean, actually I'm live here, but we're talking about in person. So we're going to have it in person in studio. And so we're able to do it because of some of the exemptions that you have, because of the way you teach and your California Center for Digital Arts, but we're also planning on keeping the amount of people in the class very, very small, so that it'll be very, very much a private type of experience. And that's how we're going to actually do it.
Right. It's almost a one-on-one. with
Yeah, be close.
very, very limited, very exclusive. And you lowered the price on that over last time too. So it's I'm glad to just be able to get back and get you in front of the camera, behind the camera, around the camera, and be able to do what you do so well. Before we get started, there's a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you. And I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on this before we get into our tonight's talk, the power of light. And I can't wait to see how you're going to talk about lighting over Zoom, but I know that if anybody can do it, it's you. So the famous desert island, right? You are stranded on a desert island and you are only allowed to have one lens. What lens?
One lens?
One lens.
Is it a big island or a small island?
It's your island.
Well, to be honest with you, it really depends on my subject matter. I am kind of married to my 85-1.8, but that's because a lot of the work I do is portrait. And so as a result, that's been my go-to. I shoot a lot of other work, like landscape work as well. And I shoot like a 50 or a 40 on a Hasselblad medium format. I love that lens all the time. And so I'm not answering your question, but that's because we're in the world of politics now. And then I just got a new lens also that's like a 20 millimeter for some of the landscape stuff that I'm doing that I really like. So, I mean, I'm not, believe it or not, I'm not as much about the equipment as you would think. I'm kind of known as a techno nerd and all the rest of those things. But to me, they're just tools, they're brushes, they're all those things. I guess if you force me to say, it might be an 85.
And I kind of thought you were going to say that because, you're a studio, you're a portrait photographer, but
mostly, yeah.
The two other lenses that you mentioned were wide angle lenses and landscape. And a lot of people don't realize that you do a lot of landscapes. You have fine art stuff hanging around the world. You've had your stuff in galleries and museums. And you actually, at our place, you hung those special images that you created that had a southwest flare to it.
Yeah, those are all done with that lens, and they were done with what we call alternative processes. So I shoot on film a lot. They were shot on film, and then they were actually Van Dyke processing, which is from like the 1840s. So you coat the emulsion on the paper itself, and then contact print it. Yeah, I'm in love with a lot of things.
Yeah. So how do you actually cook the emulsion? Like, what's the process?
Well, you mix up the chemistry, and the chemistry is relatively accessible. Although some of you most of you are probably more familiar with Van Dyke's. I'm sorry, with cyanotypes. And the cyanotype process was invented by the same person, but they use different chemistry. Van Dyke's are made with iron, so they're brown. But basically you create the emulsion, you put it down on paper in a semi-dark room. And then what I do is I make a digital internegative and put it in an 8x10 or larger contact printer. And then I take it out into the sunlight for about 5 minutes and take it back inside. And the developing is actually easier than traditional black and white photography. And so it's a very easy process. You don't need an enlarger. You don't need a dark room. And it's really organic. And what's really amazing to me is that I grew up on digital, and I grew up on film, and I started in digital. I was a really early adopter of it back, I think, in 2001. I worked with Fuji and was on the talent team there. But so I've been using digital, and the predominance of the work I do is digital. But the film, to me, man, it was such a lovely process, and the actual seeing the material come up and working with your hands, and it's a very tactile, organic process. And so there's something about that to me that is really absolutely wonderful.
I remember you being around you when you were exposing those, and actually you take it outside and expose it with sunlight.
Robert, you might remember the old printout paper back in the day with proofs. Did you ever do that?
early stages, 1965, I was doing a lot of infrared color. I got a bunch of film from
Yeah, yeah.
from the military, from Vietnam and stuff, and doing a lot of experiments that way. And the 60s in Haight-Ashbury was kind of a cool place to do bizarre stuff. It looked like you're on acid, but no simple black and white stuff. No.
Yeah, but when I started back in '78, I worked at a studio, and the generation before me, they used to do proofs. And the idea with the proofs, they would actually make contact sheets on printout paper, and you could only look at them for a while before they basically fogged, effectively fogged. And that was printout paper, which is very similar to the technique of the Van Dykes, except it's a stable process.
Yeah. That stage I was doing Codolith ortho and
Yeah,
you know, the high contrast stuff, and just, you know, we always screwed around until we had to make a living.
I know. Who knew?
Who knew?
Okay, Tim, same desert island. You were there with your studio light, your flash, and you were only allowed one modifier. Which modifier would you choose if you are only allowed to use one?
Well, those that have seen me in the studio and those that know me pretty well know that I can do more with an umbrella and more with a softbox than most people can do with 5 lights. And so I would take a large softbox and then I would use it as a large soft light, like a window light, but I'd also use it like a spotlight and use it like many other different things. So probably that, because I have so much flexibility.
Okay. Your favorite lighting setup?
That's actually changed a lot throughout the years. I think with all of us, we probably go through phases. And I'm in this phase right now. I'm going to use the terminology most of you are probably not familiar with, but I call it light within a light, or twin key, or non-homogeneous lighting, if you've seen any of my light programs. But it has to do with being able to light the face differently than lighting the body. And I do that probably almost every studio setup. I do that. I'm totally in control of. All right, so some of you saw my program on Rembrandt, and he's one of the guys that has influenced me a lot, mostly because when I started out my career early on, I kept hearing over and over again that Rembrandt was like the dude. He was the guy, and it was really amazing. And then what I learned ultimately is that the reason I thought that is because he created a little triangle of light on the shadow side. And it's like, so I don't get it. Why is he like the greatest of all time? And so I really started studying him. And it's been kind of like a lifelong type of thing. I actually learned something today, and I know this is really cliche, but I learned something today about Rembrandt I didn't know characterized. And I'm putting together a program on the history of portraiture. And I learned something that I've been teaching for a long time, but I learned it from a different angle. And so the emphasis was in a different way. And so it's going to change how I teach it. So I guess what I mean by that is it's always continually a work in progress. So there's a couple different things that actually I learned from Rembrandt besides the triangle. And this happens to be one of the Rembrandt self-portraits. And when you look at it, there is no stinking triangle. And if you know anything about lighting, you know that's probably known as paramount or glamour lighting, butterfly lighting. But it's not what Rembrandt would be known for lighting at all. I went on to learn that Rembrandt gave us a lot of different things. He gave us lighter backgrounds. He gave it kind of dark backgrounds. He had a very specific palette as far as colors. You don't see a lot of reds. You just see mostly earth tones, and he builds around that very compressed palette. He does a whole variety of different things, though, including, if you remember, I mentioned about the light within the light idea. And if you look at the body, his body right here, and just get rid of what's going on the top, you'll realize that this area down here is lit differently than what's going on contrast-wise on the face. And there's so many things different about this here that now I've actually incorporated that element into my work. And it took me a while to figure out how to do that as a photographer. Painters can do that. They can lie. They can create any contrast level they want. They can change the softness. They can change the harshness. They can change the difference between what we call specular and diffused highlights. they basically interpret. Now, we certainly do a lot of that in Photoshop now, but I try to get on the negative or on the file as much as I possibly can. So I did a portrait of David that I did in that style of Rembrandt. I asked myself the question of how would it look if Rembrandt were to do a portrait today. So instead of dressing him up in Rembrandt clothing, I tried to do the lighting style that would be similar to that. Let me see if I can go backwards. No problem. There we go. I want you to notice something else here. Really, the only thing sharp in this image is his eyes, and everything falls off to varying degrees of softness all the way down. Look at the hands. The hands are very poorly rendered, and a lot of people used to say, well, he got really old and he wasn't very good at rendering hands. It's like, no, he did that intentionally because he wanted all the attention to go back to the eyes. So I go to David and you look at what I've done here. If I go in and look at David here, you'll see that his eyes are sharp, his ears are out of focus, and you're going to say, well, that's shallow depth of field. And the answer would be maybe. And it would be. This was shot on a 4x5-inch camera. But if you look at the rest of the body here, you'll see that it's marginally sharp. And I did that in post-production to emulate that idea that there's that concept. I call it visual hierarchy now. But in PPA, for example, you hear a lot that your eyes always go to the lightest part of the frame. And there's certainly good examples of that. But there are other things that our eye is looking for also. Motion, for example, would be the first thing our eye looks for, then usually the lightest area, and then usually the next area, it's the highest contrast, and then right after that, it's going to be the areas of greatest sharpness. And if you look at Rembrandt again, well, here's an example. Here's the white, all the white around here, but what do you look at? You look at this area right here. So that kind of belies that whole concept about your eye going to the area that's sharpest. I'm sorry, that's lightest. And you'll see here that there really aren't bright areas here per se. And I've done the same thing with David. I'm controlling how people look around and look through this image and travel through this image by sharpness. The other thing I did is that when I lit this, I lit his body with a large light source, and then I lit his face with a small light source. And so the level of contrast, the sharpness of the light, the specularity of the light is very different on the face than it is on the rest of the body and the rest of the scene. So that would be some of the things that I would be doing. When you see me in a class, you'll see me talk about character, and I would consider this a low-key portrait. I think everybody would think the same, but it's more dramatic. And some people would say, well, there's not enough light over here on the side, although it's a matter of interpretation. So I picked up a lot of the drama that I use in my work, originally from Rembrandt, but I saw a lot of it in George Hurrell and a painter called Caravaggio, and actually Steichen did similar work to this, and that's probably where that comes from. So the other stuff that I do is I'm always looking for not just the visual elements, but I'm also looking for the mood, the feel, the energy. This was an image I did for a class with David, in a class for David. And we did very low-key, very moody type of things, but we wanted to do something that had more energy, more emotion, more excitement. And so we set it up on a high-key background and dressed her in more energetic clothing, I guess, for lack of a better word. So we were going through doing the whole different thing and doing all the different poses, typical poses that we do. And it was like, okay, this is nice stuff, but we really need to make it interesting. So I asked her to jump. And now you notice the heel she's in? Everybody in the class said, well, that's impossible. She goes, no, it's not. And so I had her jump, and she did that. And obviously, she is an individual that has a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm. So again, we went to a high-key background because it was a more appropriate mode to what we were doing. And by the way, you talk about who influenced me, etc. I mentioned that Steichen, Tim Meyer, and all the rest were kind of the first great photographers when it came to fashion. But then as they shot with 8x10-inch cameras, they were very refined and elegant and incredible images. And somewhere, I think it was around the 60s, the fashion industry was looking for kind of a new look. And there was this guy by the name of Avedon in Paris who was photographing, I think even with 35 millimeter, God forbid back then. But he was having his models, instead of being stilted and working with these incredible 8 by 10 inch cameras with this amazing detail. He wanted to create energy and excitement and make the work look more spontaneous. So he had all his models jump off of curbs, and they started doing the jump stop stuff. And so you might know the work of Phil Paulsman in this jump series, but Avedon got his start having models jump off curbs by just creating more energy. And so literally I thought of that when I was doing this work, that it's like, okay, this is kind of cool. This is fine. We did what we needed to do. But to create some motion or excitement with it, I created activity. And so in this case, I had her jump. A lot of times other fashion photographers will actually have them step or jump from one foot to another. This went to kind of an extreme, but that was kind of the thought process behind it, that if you're going to add energy, you have to add energy to the pose and to the activity. So that's where that comes from. So I wanted to talk about light in a more specific way. And since we're kind of in this COVID environment, teaching virtually is kind of difficult. I came across a particular program that allows me to teach in a way that is a little bit different. So this particular program is comes out of Germany, of all places. And what it allows you to do is to take an image, pull an image up and say, okay, well, how did they create this image and what do I want to do? I'm teaching a class now on life photography, and I show a lot of different work. This happens to be a piece by Ruth Bernard. And if you're not familiar with the work of Ruth Bernard, it looks like Bernhard is the way but it's pronounced Bernard. Look it up. And she was one of the great iconic female figure study artists in all history, actually. But I pulled this image, and this program allows me to pull up an image and say, okay, how would you do that? And I can ask my students, so what are the elements here? What's the mood? Is this really deep and rich and dark, like, say, a Rembrandt or something along those lines? Or is this a little more airy, a little more ethereal? And I would say it's probably airier and more ethereal as opposed to being dark and moody, except that there really aren't any super rich darks there. So the question is how it was actually produced. And one of the things I try to teach is not only learning how to recognize particular styles and emotions and narratives, but also learning how to use tools that can get you to that position. So I would ask my students, so where are the light sources? What were the modifiers and how was it done? So I could do that. What do we got, about a group of 21? Let's not do it in this case because of the amount of time we have. We don't have that much time left, but you can obviously see that there's light coming from the side. And most of you probably know how to do this. And then there's probably a light coming from the foreground. So literally what I can do with this program, I can put a model in here and I can take the model and I can move it around. I can actually show you my lighting setup. And I can, if you see it from above, this is the lighting setup from above, or I can move it around to give you a better sense of where everything is. And so when I look at this image, I see, okay, we got two lights coming from behind, and that's basically what I have here. But I'm looking at some of the things that were unique to this image. So you notice the shoulders don't have any light on it, and I have light on the shoulders here. So the question is, how do you accomplish that? And also, what is the character of the light that's coming from the side? In this case, I happen to have two strip lights coming from almost behind, but I can move them around, and you can see as I move them, and if you watch what happens over here on the body, you can actually see how the light changes when I change the direction. I can also make it go up and down. I can turn it. And for the sake of being really obnoxious, I still have light on that shoulder here. So the question is, how do I get rid of it? Now I can emulate the width here, but I can't get rid of the shadow here that well. So I'm going to change the modifier. So I'm going to click on here and go to a modifier here, and I'm going to put a grid on it, maybe a 10-degree grid here. And now you see that I have a grid light, and I can change the intensity. And now I can feather it down off the shoulder a little bit. Bring this down a little bit. There we go. And so bring it over, and there we go. So I can teach them how to move lights still, and I can teach them to recognize the type of lights that we have. And so we have the same thing going on over here. So the question is, how do I get there? And the answer might be bring this down, feather it down. Actually, probably have to go all the way down there to there. And then you can see that I've kind of got the light off the shoulder there. But the other thing you can see is that if I have just a single light here, it does become very dramatic, and I can move it around and create very different looks depending upon what I want to do. But this is really an exercise in control and making decisions about where you want lights to be and how you want to express mood. And so let me go back over to here, turn the sky on, and here we go. So again, here's my lighting setup basically. And what most people, I find really difficult to teach people how to see light and figure out where it has to come from. And so this program is actually very good at that. I can literally go in, let me change the studio light setup so you can see a little bit better. I can move the light around, and most people will take a while to figure out to get that edge right there. It doesn't come from the side. They think it comes from the side. And if it comes from the side, it goes too far around. And so if I need it to be thinner, I have to keep moving it further and further back. And you see how I control the thinness of that. And then I'm always looking for seeing where it hits on the body. So in this case, I have it hitting just right there. But maybe if I go too far, it disappears and I lose the separation there. So I can move it around to right there, where I want my separation to be. And I can do the same thing on this edge by moving this light around and making it ever so slender like that. And it just totally creates a different mood depending upon what you're trying to achieve. So again, that would be a very deep, dark mood. So the question is, how do I get this illuminated in here? I have to bring in a second light. So I actually I asked that of my student, what do I need to bring in? He said, well, why don't you bring in an umbrella? So I brought in an umbrella. And so here's my umbrella right here. And I said, where do you want to put it? He goes, it needs to be right up on top looking down, which is kind of like what is the lighting process du jour these days. Let's see here. Let's move it out of the way a little bit so it's not actually in there. And so when I look at that, I said, okay, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not really what's actually going on here. If you look at the shadow from the shoulder here coming down, you're seeing a totally different look. And so the question was, where does that light have to come from to create that look? And the answer became almost from on camera, because it almost eliminates all shadows. And the question is, what's the intensity need to be? And the intensity needs to be somewhere in there, something like that. And it creates that look. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can change how, I'm going to change modifiers on this. I'm going to go to a beauty dish and see what a beauty dish does as far as the look. And you can see it's actually much more specular and much shinier, probably even closer than what I did with the large softbox. And so this program is really pretty incredible, albeit not perfect. By the way, let me switch to another image here, just to give you one more idea. And we're going to go to only using this program to demonstrate basically how I teach and what kind of looks you can create. I'm going to switch over. Well, let me show you the overall. So I have a model here. I have a large octabank here, strip light here, and I have a spotlight here with different color temperature here. Literally, I can take that spotlight and turn it off. And I can turn off my other light over here. And what I want to do is, if you look at this real closely, this becomes this really nice soft light. Then you can see the soft skin aspect of it. I'm going to change it to a very small softbox, maybe like that. And then I'm going to put a grid on it, like that. Did I get a grid on it? I got a grid on it. And so on a good day, when I move that light in, I can actually get it. Oops, you know what? It never changed. There we go. Okay, so now what I have here is I can move this light in closer And you can see it's a soft light, but if I move it in very close, it actually is a little more focused than what I had with the other one. And so if I bring this down in intensity, you can see it right there. It's a very focused beam of light, albeit soft. And then if I add my other light over here, let's switch back over here. That's nice. I'll turn this guy off. See where I want to bring that edge in. Just create a very small edge there. Let's bring it back a little bit so we're out of frame. Turn this guy on. And then I'll add the one spotlight, which is this guy. And so I'm going to bring him down in intensity. So if I take all the elements off and just leave the spotlight needs to come a little bit over right there, maybe. And then I can start adding my other elements. There's my spot right there. And then if I come back, I can add an edge over here. And I can add an edge over here. There we go. And then my spotlight got turned off. So the idea being that we have some really amazing tools that we can use to teach still virtually. And if I were to get you in the studio, we would be doing similar work. The difference would be that I am able to have you move the lights versus me moving the lights and come up with a concept. So it is about creating impact. It is about telling stories with lights and with brushes and making things happen. So, David?
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions, and it's this is an amazing program. I don't, you showed this to me when you first got it, but yeah. So Bob was like, "Oh my gosh, it's freaky cool. How much is this program?"
So if you see up here, it's called Satellite. If you Google that, you'll get there. I believe it's about $155, but if you're an educator, you can get it for much less than that.
Okay. And then does this program have a natural light application to it?
No, but I taught natural light on it. I use this in my class. I have a window light set that I created. And it's basically, the scene is, so the answer is I don't have anything outside, no. But I can teach window light with it by just literally, what I did, if you look closely, I guess you can see that I put a softbox between two walls and you can see how the light comes out. And so those of you that have had me before know that I teach walking the light and how the light is different when you're at the front edge here versus when I go to the middle and when I go to the back, and how that light changes. And so it's really pretty obvious when you do that. So that's how I teach natural light. And I can go all the way to here and turn her body a little bit and produce that light. So beyond that, no, they don't have a natural light application.
Okay. And then are there any modifiers that are not in there? As you were scrolling up and down, it's like, oh my gosh, look at, I mean, it's not just one softbox. There's every softbox, every shape, every size.
So somebody asked about reflectors. So here's a reflector setup I set up. And so you can see it here as far as the overall look. And then you can go down and look at, hold on. I don't know why that's not happening. You can change the model. You can change your hair. You can change your outfit. You can change the props. All sorts of different props. But the props are over here, so I can put her on a couch because that's really exciting. A lot of the stuff they're doing prop-wise, etc., to me is not all that exciting, but they do create these interesting scenes. I'm really all about lighting direction, teaching people how to see and how to create different moods. But yeah.
And then, Tim, when you are in the studio, what is your method of getting your lights metered correctly? What's your frame of mind? Do you set one light up, turn it off, then get to another light and do it? Do you do them separately, or do you use the additive method? Or
Well, when I'm doing fill lights and those, yeah, I will take a set like this, and this is a 1:2 lighting ratio. And so I will go ahead and read the light from this one alone. So I turn this guy off, and I will then take a meter reading on this, and then I will go ahead and turn this guy on, this other guy on, so that I come up with, let's see here, there we go. So that I will come up with the look that I want. But I meter them, I call it the additive method. I meter this one alone and then I add this one on top. And if I want a 2-stop difference, I know that when I add this one on top and I'm shooting both together, that there's going to be a 2-stop, twice as much light on the right-hand side than there is on the fill side. So that's how I get there. I don't know if that made any sense at all because it was really quick.
No, it made sense to me. You use the additive, you leave one on and then go to the other one. So very good. The class that you have coming up at the center, you have 1 day indoors, 1 day outdoors. Have you thought about yet how you're going to, the focus of the classes? Will you be doing the light within the light?
That's a really good question. And it depends an awful lot on who I have in the class, because at the very first day, we talk about who I have, what their areas of expertise are, how far along they are. I try to figure out where they are, and then I will go ahead and put together different ideas and try to build them around different moods. So once I come up with the concept of what I want to do with the model that I have or with the subject that I have, then it really becomes a matter of, well, how do I articulate that? How do I achieve that? And I really look at lights and pose and composition, all those elements as just tools, kind of like a vocabulary that I can put together. And I think very much musically, I'm looking for rhythms and patterns and different things. This is an image done in wine country, and it was done outdoor lighting, and it was actually a very bright day. I found soft directional light, and if you look right here, there is direction here. And so, albeit very, very soft, but I wanted a high key, airy, light look in contrast to this image here, again, done in San Diego. And we wanted to create something really dramatic and dynamic. So we used a singular light source, very hard edge specular light source, actually a Fresnel, and did it with one light. And so, again, really the composition, the pose, the contrast, the light itself are, to me, vocabulary words. And in a way, what I mean by harmony and musical composition, the expression, the pose, the dynamics of the pose, the dynamics of the dark shadows, etc., to me, have to fit the overall mood. You might have seen this one. This is for a class up in David's at CCDA, and this is really about having an opportunity to do a Rembrandt or Renaissance-esque portrait. And so I took what I had as a model and lit it for that period as in that mood. And then this was up in Oregon, and it was, we were demonstrating lighting here. I just dropped this image into the background, but I look at an image and I look at the subject matter that I have and I decide, am I playing rock and roll? Am I playing acoustic? Am I playing jazz? What am I playing? And build around it. So I don't go in necessarily with a preconceived idea until I see what I have to work with.
Then the last question that we have for you, do you ever use filters?
I do some high-speed sync. So I'm using, well, actually, no, you can emulate that with neutral density filters. I do filtration in post-production a lot. Mm-hmm. But in camera capture, generally not. Okay. Polarization would be the one I would use on a regular basis for landscape. Yes.
Okay. I'm assuming they were meeting in the studio. So you pretty much
So
captured.
doing gels and color? Yeah, I do, but not that much. That's not my signature, but I certainly teach it and have done it. Yeah.
Okay. And then the question popped up, how about neutral density outside? And I'm going to assume, of course, if you do use neutral density.
I use neutral density for long duration exposure. Yes.
Right.
I love to do a couple minute exposures on the water and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And a couple seconds on waterfalls and all that.
Very good. Well, Tim, I want to thank you for joining us this evening and kicking off our artist series. Hopefully I'd like to invite you back a couple of times throughout the year. I never know what's going to come out of your mouth, but it's always good stuff.
Huh? Yeah. I don't either. That's a problem, but we're working on it. There's therapy.
Yeah. The one thing I like about working about you is nothing is preconceived. I mean, you like you say, you kind of go into it organically and you let the people take you where it needs to go. Really great seeing that program and watching you work with it. And it's kind of like you refer back to music and like you were singing with that setup. I mean, just the way that you were going through and changing a light. I mean, was it a hard learning curve? I mean, you know all the lights, you know where they need to go. You kind of know what you would use in different situations. But looking at that program, it looks pretty complicated.
I just got a lot of buttons on it and a lot of choices. I only showed you some of it, and no, you just have to play. I mean, I did the typical mail thing. I didn't really read the manual. So,
Yeah.
but I do have a question for everyone that saw it. I mean, what did you think about that as a teaching tool? Did that give you some idea of what can be done in the studio, Robert? That's a yes.
I'm so amazed with it. It's just phenomenal. I want to play and play and play.
And by the way, there are things that I cannot demonstrate in that with that, and I can show it better with that than any other thing I've ever done. But that does not replace and will not replace actually being there and seeing you guys do it.
No, it's great.
But any other comments from anyone else about it?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Terry. Yeah.
Okay. Constant light as opposed to flashlight.
Yeah.
And it's good for showing constant light, but you have to set up your lights differently for flash. You got to do a lot of trial and error to nudge them and place them and find out where the lights are shining. I mean,
well,
you don't have a modeling light.
Yeah, if you don't have modeling light, absolutely. Yeah, if you're using speed lights or something without modeling lights, yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, well, I would agree with that. It's a challenge.
Is there any? Is it addressed in any way in this program, or you just?
I can turn the modeling light off.
Okay.
Well, I think, Terry, what you're asking is to really test that, it's not trial and error a little bit because Tim uses a light meter. So by the time that he's clicking the shutter, he's pretty close. I mean, knowing exactly the quality and the quantity of light is coming out just because he spends so much time with that meter.
That's true. I agree with that.
I'm incredibly quick.
The problem is just that slight motion of the light stand, a few inches left or right, can change the character of the light.
I will say.
Well, it depends on your light source. I mean,
Yeah.
Umbrellas and softboxes are really forgiving. But if you're dealing with focus lights like Fresnels or spotlights or whatever, then yeah, it does make a dramatic difference. Yes.
I will tell you that Tim will be going in depth with the difference with front edge and rear edge and showing you what happens when that light does move a little here and there.
And we will be talking, at least in the next program, about outdoor lighting. And I'm known for what I do in the studio, but I honestly think that, and it's because I was a wedding photographer back in the 90s, where natural light was like the big thing, and we had to do things really quickly. And so early 2000s or whatever it was, but I can find natural light that looks very dramatic and very powerful because I know how to use it. And let me share with you one other thing. I just gave my students the assignment to photograph window light, which we all think of window light as a very soft, romantic light source, but I had them use it as an edge light. And so I taught them how to use that light as an edge light. And here we go. These are all done by my students in my one class. This was their first lighting assignment, using window light as an edge. And so no modifiers, no reflectors, just window light, and knowing how to do it. And so I work a lot with natural light. I love that image. And it's like, but I teach you how to use it in creative ways. And as a wedding photographer, you only had a very limited amount of time, and you had to create images that were different within that same location as quickly as possible. So that's where that came from. And that skill set, I polished it and got really good at it. So I'm actually very good outdoors with natural light, and I'm what I call a minimalist. So that I think is something that would be incredibly beneficial also.
So,
Although we will talk about using strobe as a modifier outside, and we'll probably do some high-speed sync depending upon the interest.
no, it's your classes at the center are always pretty amazing. It's always you always go above and beyond. The last studio lighting class, you spent the second half of the day using window light.
Yeah.
It just blew everybody away. So I took and put the link to Tim's class at the center in the chat room. I know that we have 2 spots left in the class. Like Tim said, it's very, very small, very intimate. It's almost like being tutored by the great Tim Meyer. So if you are at all interested, click that link and please check it out. Tim, I'd like to thank you again.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
It's good seeing a lot of friendly faces.
And then if anybody misses the link or anything, if you just send a note to the center, we'll make sure that you get that. Also, newsflash, Tim Meyer finally has an Instagram page. I would recommend that you guys follow him on Instagram. He's been good at putting some of your stuff in there, some of the old stuff. So it's not that old of a page because Tim, he's been a Facebook guy for years, but somebody bent his arm and said, you really need to have an Instagram.
Yeah, although it's been around for about 3 years now. You bent my arm 3 years ago. But if you're interested in the kind of the more current work that I'm doing, you'll see that, and this is it. It's actually Tim_I_Meyer is my handle, I guess. But I mean, you see, I do landscape. I do a lot of natives. I do a lot of different things. So it'll give you an idea kind of what I do and the variety of things I do.
I like that self-portrait of you.
I heard her voice, but I didn't hear it.
The self.
Oh, you like this one? Self-portrait? Yeah, that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, exploding head. Yeah, somebody gave me a compliment. That's what happens. But it's amazing. This is an image from an outdoor lighting class we did with flash fill at David's. This was an image we did at David's. That's an image done at David's. This was done at David's. CCDA. So this is one of the outdoor. This is from one of the outdoor lighting classes. This is flash outside. This is flash outside, like 10 feet down the road. We wanted to make it look like direct sunlight, or actually more like night. This was part of the high-speed sync demo. So there's a lot of CCDA stuff in here. There's one right there. There's one right there. A lot of West Coast school stuff. But yeah, I'm apparently very confused. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm all over the place.
Man of many talents.
So we'd love to see you there.
Great. Okay, well, that is it. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and hope to see you all soon. Tim, thanks again for joining us. And
Pleasure.
yeah, okay, well,
Look forward to seeing you up north again. Thanks so much.
Hey, it was
Good
good
seeing
being
you.
up there.
okay,
Well, we get
All right.
bored a lot, so we'll have you back again.
very
It's a
good.
day.
Tim, do you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Goodbye to everybody.
We'll close this.
Long.
Okay, thanks again, everybody, for joining us.